Like I say, welcome to this Moon Books talk on this Wednesday night. My name's Andrew Anderson, and I'm a relatively new author from Moon Books. I've only got one book out with them at the moment, but I have got more forthcoming. So I thought I'd just tell you a bit about myself and my books as I start, and then I'll kind of tell you what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, my first book, the one that you may have heard of, is this. This is The Ritual of Writing, and this came out about a year ago, just over a year ago. It's my first book with Moon Books, and it's doing quite well. I think people quite like it, which has made me very happy. You never know when you write a book; you're never quite sure if people are going to like it, but people seem to like this one. If you don't know what it is, um, it it is about writing, obviously, but it helps you to kind of use your own writing as a way of developing your spiritual practice. So it gets you to think about writing as you use it, as well as giving you writing tasks to do. Okay, so it's not just like a creative writing book. It kind of hopefully goes a little bit deeper than that as well. So that's the book that you may already know. But quite excitingly, I have another book coming out with Moon Books next year, so next June, and I have a copy of it here to show you because I'm very proud of this one. Oh, look at that! Isn't that beautiful? This is Artio and Artuis, a journey towards the Celtic bear gods, and this is something that I kind of worked on through the end of 2019 and into the beginning of 2020. So, like I say, this is forthcoming next year, and I love the cover of this book. You can't really see it particularly well. There we go. And obviously, this is nothing to do with me, so I can rant and rave about how beautiful this cover is. It's done by an artist called Beth Wildwood, who I interviewed as part of my process of writing this book because she works a lot with bear imagery. So she's interviewed in this book, and I said to her, "Will you draw a picture for the front?" She came up with that, and I just think it's absolutely wonderful. So I'll be talking a little bit more about this later on, um, but essentially, that's the introductions to me. Um, one of the things I don't want this to be is just simply me talking at you for an hour. If you've read my book, if you've read The Ritual of Writing, you know that I don't. I like things coming back at me. I like kind of feedback and responses from people. So the thought of talking at you for an hour is genuinely quite terrifying. So if you've got any questions for me as we go along, please do send them in, and I'll try to answer them. I'm also going to set you a task. Oh yeah, you've got a bit of a task to write into me about as we go along, um, just so that we get a little bit of interaction, because I do think that that interaction is worthwhile. Okay, so I'll be asking you your question in about 10 minutes or so, I suppose. But if you've got any questions for me, please to just pop them through at any time. Okay, so this talk tonight is called The Magic of Time and Place, because I was trying to think of a theme that I could talk to you about that would cover what I've dealt with in both of my books. And so I sat down and thought about it and thought, well, actually, both of them deal with the magic of time and place in different ways. This one kind of tells you how to use it, okay, how to work with time and place in your writing. This one is actually an exploration, particularly of place. You can see it's called A Journey Towards the Celtic Bear Gods. And that's because there's parts of this book which are kind of like a little travelogue. They're like a little travel guide to different places you can go to get in touch with bear energy. So I went to various places, which I'll talk to you a bit about later, and visited those places and tried to tap into that energy and describe it in my writing. But I thought we'd start with time, because time is actually quite a big factor of my spirituality. I suppose I should let you know, in case you don't know, I'm a druid. Okay, for want of a label, I suppose I am a druid. Um, but I don't kind of feel myself to be a natural druid, if that makes sense. When I go to gatherings, I meet lots of very lovely people who are kind of very creative, and very bohemian and very wonderful. And then I kind of look at myself and go, oh, you look a bit ordinary. You look like you look like a school teacher on a day off, which I suppose I kind of am, frankly. And so how I got to be a druid was to do with time, because I went to a Church of England school, and I really liked it. I went to a Church of England school in St Albans in Hertfordshire, and so we had to go to the Abbey 3 times a year to do very exciting things at the Abbey. Um, we had services as a drama student. There was a very wonderful time when I got to be Satan in the Abbey, which is just frankly fantastic. But there was something about that. Although I liked going there and singing the songs and being in the Abbey, it didn't quite stick. Uh, then I went to university, and when I went to university, I encountered people who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and I spent 2 years training with Jehovah's Witnesses, which again, there were moments that were very interesting and which were quite revelatory, but it just wasn't sticking with me. There were things that just, I don't know, I just couldn't quite take on board. Um, so I left university, and as many of us do, we tried exploring different routes. So I tried Buddhism, and I just didn't get it, I'm afraid, until I went to China. This is the magic of place that I'm talking about. As a Buddhist in Britain, I couldn't connect with that at all. I found it very odd and quite alienating. But as soon as I went to China and stood in the Jade Buddha temple in Shanghai, I suddenly got it, and it worked, and it was magical and wonderful. But I kind of realized, as I'm not staying in Shanghai, this probably isn't a route I can go down. And I had a friend at the time who was a witch, still is a witch, is a very good witch. And I was kind of intrigued by what she was doing as a Wiccan. And so I spent time talking to her and listening to her, and she kind of helped me. But unfortunately, Wicca just wouldn't stick either. There was quite a lot of it I couldn't quite wrap my head around. But the one thing which I loved in Wicca was that Wheel of the Year, the Celtic Wheel of the Year, those festivals. Oh, they are great and beautiful things. That eightfold Wheel of the Year was kind of the thing that turned the light on for me after all of those different spiritualities. Um, and so when I wandered away from Wicca, I described myself as vaguely pagan for about 10 years. I wasn't anything in particular, but I kind of knew that I was sort of in that area. And I was working as a creative writing teacher at this time, and I I was trying to inspire other people to write, but not writing myself. I was completely lacking inspiration. And one day I was just kind of digging around on the internet as you do, and I found Druidry. I found Obod, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. And there was that magical word, that first layer of Druidry, which is the Bard. And if you read kind of like the introductory information, it's like, we will help bring you inspiration. I was like, this is it. This is my calling. It's a spiritual path that is going to help me write. So I'm going to love this. So I signed up, did a bit more digging first, and found that within the middle of Druidry is that eightfold Wheel of the Year, which I'd so fallen in love with back when I was kind of working with Wicca. So I thought, right, we've got the Wheel of the Year, we've got inspiration, I'm in, I'm sold. So I explored various druid orders and eventually signed up to Obod. So that is how the Wheel of the Year kind of ended up right in the center of my spirituality. And one of the key ways that I worked as a druid was to rewrite the 8 festival stories, because as a member of Obod, you're sent uh, ceremonies to do, and I found that I wasn't they weren't quite hitting home to me. So I did a little bit of reflection, and I realized just how stories are important to me in a spiritual sense. So for me, Christmas, the most important thing about Christmas is not getting presents, although that's very lovely. The most important thing about Christmas is the Christmas story. I love that story about the baby being born in a manger, and being visited by shepherds and angels and wise men. I mean, it's a fabulous story. Um, And then I went, well, okay, well, if these festivals aren't sticking for me, if there's something about them that I need to explore a bit further in terms of time, I think I need to attach a story to the different times. And I need to write myself stories that are as powerful, if possible, that move me in the same way as that story of the baby in the manger moves me. Okay. I also, from when I was younger, I love Easter. I think Easter's a great holiday, if you can call it that, a great festival, because you've got Good Friday, which is very mournful, through to Easter Sunday, which is very happy. And so you can kind of map that out over a couple of days. And I always find myself very moved at Easter. So when I was coming to these festivals, I wanted to feel something as potent as those stories that I'd learned when I was a child. Because one of the things that's growing to interest me now that I've kind of written this, which is essentially about the process of writing those stories, those eight festival tales. That's what this is about, and encourages you to tell your own. One of the things I'm becoming more and more interested in is how we layer stories spiritually for ourselves. So I've just told you about Christmas, and my earliest memory of Christmas is sitting in my infant school class with my favourite teacher, Mrs. Freeman. She was awesome. Um, and she got us to write the Christmas story in these little books. So we made little books, and then on one side we had a little bit of writing in our big kind of 5-year-old writing, telling a bit of the story of the nativity. And then on the other side of the page we stuck a picture that we'd drawn. So, a stick version of Mary holding a baby, that sort of thing. And I remember running out with it at the end of the week to give to my mum, because this thing was just the most valuable thing I'd done. So that story is the basis. Okay, that story, the nativity, is the baseline, I suppose. But then you layer other stuff on. So kids know the story of the nativity, but they also know the story of Father Christmas. And of course I did. And recently I've just remembered this really fantastic magical experience I had with my dad when I was about 12. He took me to see that terrible movie, Santa Claus the movie, which they show every Christmas. But this was the year it came out. It was the big Christmas movie. And I remember my dad taking me to see it. And we'd had a bad couple of years, me and my dad. It'd been quite hard. But when we came out of that cinema after seeing Santa Claus the movie, the world was covered with sparkliness. I mean, literally, the world felt magical. I remember it. We drove home, both of us. My dad, who was in his 40s, like completely blown away by how wonderful and magical this movie was. And as we stepped out of the car, when we got home, the clear, starry sky, and I pointed up at a plane in the sky, and I said to my dad, "Look, it's Father Christmas doing a trial run." And I think for both of us, I think it was. And every time now, when it's like the middle of winter in the run up to Christmas, and I see a plane go over, it's Father Christmas. So we have these stories which we layer for ourselves. We have the Nativity at Christmas, we have Father Christmas, and then we layer stuff on top of it. Wonderful things like the Christmas Carol, Dickens's Christmas Carol. And we have Mickey's Christmas Carol and the Muppet Christmas Carol, and we have the book, we have all different versions of the Christmas Carol that we may access. And Christmas isn't Christmas until we've seen the Muppet Christmas Carol. Um, for some people, it's Love Actually, and we layer those stories on. They may not be myths. It may even be as simple as I've got to watch the EastEnders Christmas special to see that story. I am becoming much more interested now in how we layer these stories and how we use stories to help us believe in things and to shape our approaches towards different festivals and different times, because that is essentially what we're talking about here is time, and we use those different stories to help define time. Another one for me is Halloween. I always try to watch The Nightmare Before Christmas on the 1st of November, so it's in between Halloween and Christmas. But Halloween isn't Halloween Samhain until I've seen John Carpenter's 1978 film Halloween. It's kind of, it has to be there. That story is part of the telling of the day. I love reading the Washington Irving Legend of Sleepy Hollow in the run up to Halloween. And there's all these different stories. that you can kind of layer and bring meaning to these different festivals in our own personal way, and get these times, these festivals, to talk to us and how we help create. So, at the beginning of this talk, I said I was going to set you a challenge, and that time has now arrived. So, no one's commented on anything yet. So, I hope you can all hear me. And I hope that you are some of, I can see that there's some people there, but I hope you're up for a bit of a challenge, because I'm going to set you a task. In this book, I discuss writing a different story, retelling an old myth for the different Wheel of the Year festivals. Um, and we're coming up to one. We're about 3 or 4 weeks away from our next Wheel of the Year festival, and that is Alban Elfed, Mabon, the autumn equinox. Okay, we're approaching the autumn equinox quite quickly now. And what I want you to do is just think about the kind of story that you would write, or or a story, if you've been doing some of the exercises in this book, the story that you have written, which explores Alban Elfed, the autumn equinox, for you. Okay, what kind of story have you told, or what kind of story could you tell? Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this tonight is because I think this is one of the most difficult festivals to discuss. So while you're sending in your ideas down here, I'm just going to kind of give you some hints of other festival tales that you could tell at different times of the year, to kind of give you an idea of the sort of thing you could talk about. So obviously, at the solstices, we have um, the Holly King and the Oak King. That story, which can be told either at the summer solstice, where the Holly King hands over to the Oak King, or the other way around at the winter equinox, where the Oak King, where the Holly King hands over to the Oak King. So you can explore that moment of connection, that moment of transition there. There's other things you can do. I've written myself a second festival tale for the winter equinox, which is the story of the Deer Mother. And this is an ancient Finnish tale, I think, where the Deer Mother carries the newborn son up into the sky in her antlers. It's why Santa Claus has uh, reindeer that fly. It's based on this myth. So I've kind of rewritten myself a festival tale around that. In the summer equinox, sorry, the summer solstice, there's loads and loads of stories that you can tell. Um, I told one based on Midsummer Night's Dream, but there's loads of things about the heat of the summer, that transition, the prevalence of the light, the shortest night of the year. You can do loads and loads of things there. But what about this autumn equinox? Nobody's come in with an idea yet. So if you do have any ideas, please do send something through. What kind of a story could you write for the autumn equinox that would kind of explore that season for you? Similarly, the spring equinox, it matches up with Easter. So we've got lots of stories about hares or rabbits or eggs that we could write there. And there's things are coming to life at that time of year. So that you've kind of got an excuse for a kind of a big adventure story. And let's think about those fire festivals, those cross festivals. Imbolc, we've got a very close focus on Bridget. So working with Bridget, retelling an aspect of Bridget's story is a really good thing to do for a Beltane, an Imbolc tale. At Beltane, obviously, we've got loads of things. We've got fires, and it's a bit of a sexy holiday, frankly, Beltane, isn't it? You know, 50 Shades of Beltane, practically. You have to be, I found you have to be very careful with those stories, because otherwise, you know, there's a great deal of passion and sexuality about Beltane. So you could kind of write that sort of story if that floats your boat, if that's what you want to write, if that's what that festival means for you. And similarly, at Lunasa, we've got the story of John Barleycorn, as well as tales of the god Lu himself. So again, there's plenty of scope for writing a festival tale around Lunasa about harvests and things like that. John Barleycorn, the Ballad of John Barleycorn itself is a great song, and really is kind of very inspirational for writing. So if you're looking for a Lunacy story to write about, you can write about that one. And obviously Samhain, well, where do you stop, frankly? I mean, there's so many kind of horror stories and spooky tales that you can tell about Samhain. I found really when I was writing my Samhain tale, I had to pull myself back. I had to really kind of pick what I wanted. What does this holiday specifically mean to me? Um, so you know, it's a Samhain is a very very good festival for stories. Um, but what about the autumn equinox? Well, I've had no comments yet, so either that means you can't hear me, or you don't know. Um, so I'm going to go with the fact that you don't know, because actually, I have to admit, when I started writing my autumn equinox story, I didn't know. There is nothing obvious to write for Alban Elfed for the autumn equinox, because what have you got? It's the fruit harvest, which is, you know, tiring but not particularly exciting. And we're at the balance of light and dark, with darkness winning. So there's not really an obvious story, an obvious tale to write. And I really struggled with what I could write for my autumn equinox story. And so I went back. I went back to a story that I had come across when I was writing at Lunacy. And at Lunacy, I'd visited Glastonbury. I'd gone to Glastonbury for a little break to get away to do a little bit of writing. And while I was there for a few days. It was quite sunny. I decided to go on a bit of a hike. People told me about Gog and Magog. Now, as I said, I was a bit of a rubbish druid at that stage, so I'd never really heard of Gog and Magog before. Um, and so I walked up over Glastonbury Tor to the far side of the Tor, and I went to meet Gog and Magog. And I spent some time there with them, and I kind of fell in love with them. I mean, what an awesome pair of trees they are. If you haven't visited them, please do. It's a couple of really big, solid oak trees. I think Gog's dead now, and I believe somebody set fire to Gog in the not too distant past. So there's trouble there now, but still go round and see them. They are still a beautiful pair of old trees, and they used to form part of a corridor. They're the only two that remain of an avenue of trees that used to lead onto the island from the mainland. Um, and so it's you know, they are a really wonderful pair of trees and well worth going to see. And they were what I picked up for my story. Now I've just had a message from Rachel, so I'm just going to see if I can get that. 1 second. I'm going to just have a quick look on my phone. Uh, oh, that's right, Rachel. No, I don't have. Oh no, Rachel, I haven't. If you've got comments, if you can see comments and I can't, I have got comments. They should come up on the left-hand side of your screen. Unfortunately, they're not at the moment. Oh, I'm really sorry about that. No, let me just check here. I'll click on that thing there that says comments. No, let's have a see. I'm really sorry if you're typing things up and I can't see them. Um, I'm really, really sorry about that. Let me just double check on that. No, no. Thank you for messaging me, Rachel. I'm really sorry I can't see them. Um, let me just see. Uh, Rachel Patterson, who excellent, amazing author, also our IT guru, and is helping us do these chats. So, Rachel, if you um, if you can think of any way that I can get to them, because they're definitely not coming up on my screen here. So, Rachel, if there's any way that you could help me get to them, that would be really lovely. I know it's a bit of an ask. Um, So I'm just going to plow on. Oh, here we go. I've got another message. I think this is yep, this is from Rachel. I think I will copy them here. Rachel, thank you. She's a lifesaver. Thank you so much, Rachel. That's really, really kind of you. I won't go any further with the stories about Gog and Magog until I've seen what's coming through here. So Victoria, I'm in the American South, so the autumn equinox is a time of waiting for the heat to break. Oh, I bet. Oh my God, the American South. I love the American South. I travelled through North, South Carolina, and Georgia. Spent some time in North Carolina. Talking about the spirit of place, North Carolina has such an amazing spirit of place. But yes, the heat. Oh wow, I went in August, and as a very pasty Englishman, congratulations on putting up with that. My story would have to be a story for prepping for the dark time of the year. I think that's right, Victoria. That's a really, really good thing. It's about that idea of closing down and gathering in. That's amazing. So thank you for that, and I'm really sorry that I didn't see it. Andrea, I think the myth of Demeter and Persephone. What a great story! Again, that idea of going into the underworld and having a period in the underworld. That's brilliant, Andrea. Thank you so much for that. That's a really good story. And even if you don't use it directly, that idea of going into the underworld, the fruit, obviously, the fruit that she has, um, which I can't think of the name of. It's the pink thing with lots of. Anyway, you know what I mean. The thing that she takes into the underworld, fabulous, a great, and it links in with the fruit harvest there because it's connected to agriculture and the harvest. Obviously, brilliant. Yes, thank you very much, Andrea. I've got Mickey here. Amazon has the Artio and Artemis book listed as pre-orders for July 2021. Yes, that is. I think it's the end of June. I think it's the 28th of June. It's somewhere around there that it's coming out. Any way to get a copy beforehand? I'm not sure. Unfortunately that's a publishing question. I've got my one, which I'm kind of using to kind of promote, but I'm not quite sure how many more are available. And then another one, a pomegranate, of course. Thank you. The pink brain went. Sorry, technology affected brain. The pomegranate, yes, absolutely. That is what Persephone takes into the underworld with her. And Andrea, I'm a writer, so that book sounds very interesting to me. Well, I hope it is, Andrea. As a writer yourself, I'm sure you know the power of words. You're obviously a writer because words kind of chime in with you. Um, but it's it's there's hopefully there's things in here that will just get you to reflect on that a bit more and try some different things. My favorite chapter in here, which I will talk a bit more because I'm going to talk about place in a minute. My favorite chapter is called Taking Your Story for a Walk, because I think as a writer, I think we can all agree, as a writer, you get stuck in corners like this at computers and with books writing, and it can be quite solitary in that sense. And this is about taking that work out into the wildness outside your door and seeing how it fits with what's actually going on in the real world. I'll be talking a bit more about that in a second. But thank you very much, Andrea, for that comment. That's lovely. Jackie Cook says hi. Hi, Jackie. Hi, Luna. Luna Fire Oak says hello as well. And Trevor. Hello, Trevor. I'm sorry, technology is failing me, but hello, Trevor from Moonbooks as well. And of course, thank you to Trevor for all of his support in helping me to publish these two books. So I'll now get back. We're talking about this story that we could tell for the autumn equinox. And we've had some great ideas. Victoria saying about waiting for the heat of the year to break and gathering in. Andrea talking about the myth of Persephone with the pomegranate going into the underground. Very good. Lovely, great ideas. I talked about Gog and Magog, and I was just telling you about them, two oak trees in Glastonbury, which I recommended you visit. Now, when I went to see them, and I kind of spent time with them, kind of communing with the tree, each of the two trees. And what I did, I was going to read it to you, but I don't think I've got enough time because it's fairly long. And I was going to read it to you if nobody commented, but clearly you did, so that's lovely. But essentially, it's a story about how, obviously, Gog and Magog, the names of these trees, are also names of giants from the Bible, and there are British legendary um, giants called Gog and Magog. So what I decided to do was write a story about how Gog and Magog became changed from giants to trees, and it's because they're planted at this corridor in Glastonbury, and they spend so long there looking at the Isle of Avalon, the island with the apples, which they help harvest at one point in the story for Athlon, who rules the island. They want to stay on the island because it has this magical, glorious property. They want to stay and eat the apples, but they can't. So they wait at the edge of the island to protect it from the humans who are going to come past. And they spend so long standing there just waiting, looking, that they end up turning into these oak trees that are still there today. And I then fast forward through kind of several centuries of life in Glastonbury to the point where we are today, which is what I said. Gog has died. So Magog stands there by herself, knowing that her husband has died. She's ancient herself, so she's going into the darkness as well. So it's this story. It's called The Giants of Avalon that I wrote, but it's about these two trees and their journey from the harvest that they pick from the trees and into the darkness. So it very much takes that Persephone view of Magog following her husband down into the darkness, um, and the real harvest in our lives, which is, of course, ultimately our deaths, I suppose. All of the autumn stories tend to have that kind of slightly dark edge. They kind of have an air of sadness. All of the ones I wrote for spring are very happy, and they all have very happy endings. But from Lunacy, the autumn equinox, and Samhain have all got slightly bittersweet endings or kind of very sad endings. So I've just had another comment through. Thank you very much, Rachel. I really appreciate this, Rachel, so much. Lizzie Large wrote, for me, Mabon is the time of year that represents in humanity the aging process. Absolutely. So I tend to experience the sun god as a man past his strength and maturity, when sometimes there are creaking joints, harder to get up in the morning. I'm so with you on that one, Lizzie. That's a brilliant, brilliant idea. I love the sun at this time of the year. As we're heading into the autumn, just as we're going to Mabon, this very last tail end of summer, um, where we can still have hot days and the sun can still be really bright, but there's a different quality to the sun. It feels like an old sun, just as you've said there. It feels like it's aged, so it's much more mellow than it is kind of just a few weeks earlier. I mean, in England at the moment, it's clearly turned to autumn now. Autumn has come early. It's come into the middle of August. We had a storm yesterday. We had an autumn and winter storm yesterday. The trees really didn't know what to do with themselves. Poor things. They were buffeted around all over the place. But we've clearly transitioned into autumn potentially quite early. Now, obviously, early September could have some sunshine, and they're saying, oh, it's going to go up to 24 degrees here, but that's nothing compared to what we've had this summer. There is a real sense that that really hot heat, that time of summer has gone, and autumn is here now. And that's one of the things that I love about the spirit of time, working with that spirit of time, really interrogating it, trying to spot when summer turns to autumn. When does that actually happen? When do you know you're there? You can obviously do it by calendar months, but actually doing it by feeling, by sensation, is something that I've really learned as a druid. And I'm sure most of you do in your spiritual practice as well. So that's the story of time that I wanted to talk about today. And I think the more you engage with that wheel of the year, the more you engage with time and with the seasons and the seasonal cycle, that wheel of the year and those stories, the more you engage with that, the more magical it becomes. Um, it's been very difficult this year because we've all been locked indoors. And I haven't been. I didn't leave the house for 4 months because of the lockdown. Because my housemate is clinically very susceptible to COVID, so I didn't leave the house right during that lovely spring period when I should be out running around the hills. So I'm sure many of us missed it. But going back out in the middle of summer was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. So anyway, that's enough about time, because this is the magic of time and place. And I also wanted to talk to you about the magic of place and how important that is to me and how important that's become, particularly again in my writing. Because I'm just going to go back to this for 1 second. The ritual of writing, it encourages you to write stories that are particular to where you live. So, if I can just get this open again, Victoria, what Victoria said about trying to tap into the autumn equinox in the American South is absolutely spot on. You need to make these stories resonate wherever you are in the world, because there's no point writing about a Celtic autumn equinox if you live in Australia. And this book, when I was writing it, it's got a section very early on about writing stories that resonate with where you are in the world. You don't have to. My Samhain story is actually set in New England, because I've been really lucky enough to spend about 3 Halloweens out in New England in the last few years. And for me, New England just is Halloween now. I mean, nowhere does Halloween like America. Britain certainly does it like America, doesn't do it like America. And I fell in love with my New England Halloweens. So I wanted to set a story there, but I kind of adapted it to what I knew. So I tried to get the spirit of that place into the story. I reflected on what it was like when I was there and tried to use the details from there, to kind of enhance the story. And there's an example that I give in here about how important place can be in anchoring your story into uh, into into the tale. So what I'm going to read you now is a little section of my Lunacy story. You'll remember when I was talking about the autumn equinox, I said I went on a little writer's retreat to Glastonbury, and I stayed in a very lovely B&B at Lunacy, where I got inspired for autumn equinox as well. And I thought, right, I'll just set myself up on this lovely balcony that my B&B had. I overlooked this wonderful orchard. It was kind of just coming to late August, and I just sat there on this balcony with my computer open, and I thought, right, whatever I see around me in this place is going to form the basis of this story. So I just want to read you the introduction to my Lammas story, which is the story of John Barleycorn, just so you can see how the place is infused into it. Some years it feels like summer will last forever, and some years it feels like summer has just arrived. But every year there is a day when you notice that summer is ending. It seems like only yesterday that the apple tree dripped with blossom, and now it is burgeoning with hard green fruit. Yes, the swallows still dance and dive in the deep blue skies, but the shadows they speed over somehow seem longer. Midges bob and weave in thick thermal sunbeams, but the breeze which buoys them has a sliver of frost at its edge. When you look out across the landscape, you notice that every shade of green is tinged with gold and brown. That is the day you know that summer is coming to an end. Now, that bit, like I say, I literally just sat out on a balcony and tried to take in what was in front of me. I was lucky enough to be in front of an orchard, so those hard green apples I described. As this is a harvest tale, I thought maybe if I hadn't actually been looking at those apples, I may have said that they'd got red. But of course, Lunacy is too early for the apple harvest, so it was really important that I kind of noticed that in the place that I was sitting. The midges, the tiny, tiny little flies that floated around, all of that I could see in front of me, I tried to distill into that section, which then kind of is repeated as the story goes on. And it's what I was saying earlier about taking your story for a walk, my favourite section about taking your story for a walk, um, about getting out into the place where you are writing and seeing what is going on, seeing what flowers are blooming, what the trees are doing, because we can all assume what's going on, but quite often that's not right. So we think with Christmas stories, with winter solstice stories, we might be very tempted to put them in the snow. When we get to Imbolc a few months later, we might be tempted to kind of go, oh, well, it's kind of first spring festival, so we'll make it a bit greener. But actually, it's far more likely to snow in England at Imbolc than it is at Christmas. I remember a lot more snow at Imbolc than I have at Christmas. So trying to get the sense of place into my story, it's really important I notice those details. The same I said when I was writing something based on Midsummer Night's Dream in the summer. I literally went for a walk and noticed all of the herbs that were coming out on the hedgerows around here. Because this is another way that I've worked out that place is really important for me. It's because it's where I moved to. I moved to a very significant place as a writer. I'm not from here originally. I'm from, as I told you earlier, a place called St Albans in Hertfordshire, which is a very lovely, lovely place. If you ever get a chance to visit, it's very overlooked. So please do go. But I'm very lucky that I live in Stratford upon Avon, which, if you are a writing fan, it's both brilliant but also slightly daunting because I'm in the place where Shakespeare lived and I'm trying to tap into that, whatever it was. But also, that's very daunting because, the greatest writer in the world lived here. So there's no way I'm going to compete. um, Somebody said to me a couple of days ago about Shakespeare's house, because the other thing is I literally live opposite Shakespeare's house. It's there. If I could spin this computer around, which I won't because the technology is already not my friend, Shakespeare's house is over there. So I live on the same street where he was born, and I'm really lucky in that I work there as well. I guide people around that house. So in terms of place as a writer, trying to feel the energy of a place as a writer, I'm in an amazing place to try to tap into that. Somebody said to me the other day about Shakespeare's house in Stratford upon Avon. They said to me, "Wouldn't it be great if, in years to come, your house and my head run ahead?" It was like that. My house is the house of Andrew Anderson. I mean, that'd be great. And he said, "No, wouldn't it be amazing if that was the house that people remembered for your cats?" I have two cats who sit in the window of my house and look out grumpily at people, and everyone takes pictures of them. So it's not that I'm any good as a writer; it's that people are going to remember my cats. But that's it. What a wonderful place to live, to try to capture what Shakespeare had in his head, because Shakespeare, as a writer, uses a lot of Warwickshire words and a lot of imagery from Warwickshire plants, and he uses Warwickshire words for plants in his plays, which is one of the reasons that we know that Shakespeare wrote those works. So place for me is really, really important, and this is going to lead me onto my next talk about Artio and Artuis, which hopefully will just whet your appetite a little bit more for the book, which will be coming next year. So, as you can see, it's called A Journey Towards the Celtic Bear Gods, because I'd heard the name Artio quite a lot. I had quite strong impressions when I came to Druidry of Artio as a bear god, and I just assumed that there was a lot of information about her out there. But when I started to dig around, there's very, very little about the Celtic bear gods anywhere. There's not an awful lot of archaeological information about the pair of them. Um, so to write this book, really, if it's just based on archaeological evidence, it would be about 2 pages long, frankly. So I had to find a way of really exploring it, and that's why it's a journey. Because what I did was I went on a series of pilgrimages to different places to try again to tap into that spirit of place that I find so important for my spirituality and for my work. So the first place I had to go, and the place that is discussed in great depth in here, is Bern, because although there are other clues to Artio kind of across Luxembourg and Germany and a little bit of France, um, if you want to know about Artio, there is one place to go, and that's Bern in Switzerland, the city of bears, because in Bern is a statue of Artio. It's a little one, it's about that big. And it's in the Bern Historical Museum. And the Celts believed that if you made a statue of a god, the god was contained in that statue. So I kind of knew if I'm writing about her, I've got to journey to her. To see that statue, to be with that statue, is the closest I'm ever going to get to this goddess. So I booked myself a trip to Bern. If you've never been, I just recommend it. It is a fairy tale city. I mean, the centre of Bern is medieval. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, I believe. And I just remember my first night there, walking through the streets of Bern and just being completely transported. I mean, it was an absolutely glorious, glorious place. Oh, I've got another message from Rachel. Oh, it's from Trevor. Trevor says RTO is a fab book. Thank you very much, Trevor. Trevor, of course, has read this. So Trevor, no, Trevor proofread it. He did the hard work on it. So thank you very much, Trevor. But yes, if you go to Bern, Bern is a magical place in itself because there are bears everywhere. There are bear murals, there's bear graffiti, there's bear statues, there's lots of bear statues. There's actual bears in the middle of the in the middle of the city. They have these bear pits, which have now been extended into an entire bear park, which it's the most glorious place. I just spent hours sitting there watching the greenery, waiting for these bears to appear, running down to the most beautiful turquoise river, the Aar, that runs through the centre of it. I simply cannot put in enough good words for Bern. Um, but if you do go, make sure you go to the Bern Historical Museum, which is where RTO is. Now, it's a fab museum anyway. They have the most amazing interactive exhibit about Einstein, going slightly off topic. Um, and it's big and flashy and kind of full of neon lights and music and very flashy. RTO, by comparison, who I think is the most important thing in that museum, because we're talking about a god here. The god is in that library, the goddess is in that library. She's kind of she's in this exhibition about the Celts on the ground floor. It goes through kind of prehistoric period through into the Celts, and nobody goes to see her. And I was stunned. Um, I was in there with that statue by myself for about 30 minutes, and in that time, one man came through. I was literally sitting on a chair by this statue looking at it. Then I moved away a bit because I thought that was a bit freaky and people might be a bit worried. Um, a gentleman came in, walked around, looked at the exhibit very quickly, and walked out. Then a couple of girls came in, went around the exhibit, took pictures of loads of things, completely ignored RTO, and walked out again. And there was me just sitting in that room with RTO, with this goddess, the most significant bear goddess of the Celtic pantheon, and no one even looked at her. I was in there so long and I was so by myself and so still that the lights went out at one point, just because nothing was happening in that exhibition. And I went out, and several people who knew I were going said, "Oh, can you get me something to do with RTO while you're out there?" There wasn't a postcard. Somebody wanted a little statue. Nothing. She's not even kind of on an eraser or a pencil. Nothing. There's this wonderful goddess, this wonderful bear goddess, who is sitting in a museum who is forgotten. And when I was kind of walking around talking to, I kind of after my time in the museum, I went off, spent some time with some Druid friends, talked to lots of people I was staying in hotels with and things. And they all said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" So I explained, I'm writing a book about RTO. And they all said, "Who's RTO?" Nobody knew. The Bernese didn't know that they had this goddess sitting in their midst, sitting in their middle. Now, like I say, I met a couple of Druid friends while I was out there and had a lovely time. Great Druid conversation about many things, but we talked a lot about RTO and Artois. Artois is even more obscure. There's one piece of evidence for Artois, but in here I explore who he was. Again, by going to different places for Artois. You need to read this to find out where I went for him. But I was talking to my friends in Bern, and they said not really, not even the Druids really know about RTO out in Bern. Having said that, since I've come back, I've kept in contact with my Druid friends, and I now found out that one of the Druid groves in Bern is now embedding RTO into their ceremony, which has made me so happy. We have kind of rescued her. We have refound her, and the Druid Grove in Bern is going to be honouring her in their work, which is just lovely. And the only reason I really kind of got to grips with her was by going there, was by getting to that place, that magical place where she was. You can look at as many pictures of that statue online as you want, and it doesn't match sitting looking at it. That statue has so many secrets to it when you look at it up close. Again, just pushing this, which we'll find out when you read this, there's so much detail and so many bits that you don't see if you just try to look at the RTO statue on the internet. You have to be in that place. I came back. I was a bit nervous about going because it was the first time I'd done like a big train journey by myself in a good couple of years. Went across Europe on a train, and I just came back utterly and utterly enthralled to this bear goddess, and the bears, just the bears of that city. What an amazing place! So when Artio and Artemis comes out next year, I'm hoping to do a couple of book launches. I'm doing one in Glastonbury for OBOD. I'll be doing one around the summer gathering. So that we can raise Artio and Artemis at next year's summer gathering. Somebody else I worked with, Louisa Potter, who works in Scotland, who works very much with the Spirited Bear. I've had some brief conversations with her about maybe doing something in Scotland, because the Spirited Bear definitely resides in Scotland, which is where Louisa works with her. But I want to take Artio back to Bern. I want to, and we're beginning to investigate where I could maybe hold a book launch for this, and it would be literally just around the corner from the historical museum where that statue sits, and where very few people go to see her. So it would just be a really lovely, lovely thing to be able to go back to that place in the name of Artio, if you like. So, place, time with that wheel of the year, fully experiencing the wheel of the year, trying to tap into exactly what's going on outside your door, with the festivals, with the weather, with the plants, with the trees, with the animals. What do each of these festivals give you in terms of time, but also in terms of place, particularly in your writing, trying to really locate your stories in a particular place to give it that grounding, so that when we read it, that place is conjured up for us, as well as just the story, locating it in time and place. Okay, so it's 7:53. I still unfortunately can't see any comments, but I'll stay on for another couple of minutes in case anyone has got any questions that I can ask, that you want to ask, that I can answer for you. So like I say, I'll just wait for a little bit just in case any comments come through, and if not, I will say good evening. We weren't disturbed by Alfie. Alfie's sitting over there very happily on the bed, and thankfully the internet kept going for us during this time. So I'm very thankful for those things. Doesn't look like we've got any more questions. Oh, hang on, maybe. There we go. Just get to it just there. Richard. Hello, Richard. Thank you, Andrew Anderson. A thought-provoking and motivating talk which enhances your brilliant book. Thank you, Richard. Really appreciate that. Looking forward to attending one of your launches for the next book. Yes, absolutely, Richard. I know Richard from OBOD, so hopefully, as we did last year, the Friday before the big summer gathering kicks off, we will be able to have a nice party and celebrate the launch of the Artio and Artio's book. Thank you very, very much for watching, Richard. Really appreciate that. Trevor. Lovely session, Andrew. Really enjoyed it. Thank you. Brilliant, Trevor. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for Rachel, who's been my online help here. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your input. Getting those comments from you was really lovely. So thank you. And hopefully I shall see you soon. Bye-bye.